Welcome along to the Zone Coverage Football Show, your pre-game build-up to NFL Sundays. We're coming at you live from Tees Towers on the TuneIn and Spreaker apps. You can also listen back on demand via iTunes and Stitcher. This is your host, Mark Tees. Today's show is brought to you by ZoneCoverageFootballShow.com, the hub for all your live and on-demand links. You'll also find a range of all our previous shows and much, much more. So head on over to ZoneCoverageFootballShow.com today. Good afternoon all. Today on Zone Coverage Football Show we have more training camp insight. Yes, we are visiting the New York Jets, the New England Patriots, and also, I'm forgetting off the top of my head, the Washington Redskins. So we have that coming up. All your latest news. We will look back at Preseason 1. All that coming up right up. Good afternoon and welcome along to the Zone Coverage Football Show, your pre-game build-up to good old NFL Sundays. I'm your host Mark Tees and I'm going to be your guide for the next 90 minutes as we delve into the wonderful world of pigskin. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the show, let's get some of these formalities out the way. First up, if you're listening live, you've got two options here. First, well, you can either listen via the TuneIn or the Spreaker app. The cool thing with the Spreaker app is the live chat room. You can interact with like-minded pigskin fans as the show unfolds, so just head on over to Spreaker.com, search for Spreaker in your app market, sign up, it's all free, search for Zone Coverage Football Show, and come and join the fun. So far in the chat room, we have David, Will, and John. Good afternoon, gents. And beyond the live options, we all know life's very, very crazy, and the Premier League's decided to take me on, so that's back up and running now. So good luck to the Premier League. Your ratings will definitely be down because everyone's tuning into this show. Wishful thinking my end, yes I know, but anyway, if you can't listen live, you can listen back at your own leisure via the iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and also SoundCloud. And whilst you're there, just leave us a rating and some feedback. That'd be fantastic. You can also connect with me today via social media. You'll find me on Facebook, Google+, and also Instagram now. Just, again, search Zone Coverage Football Show. If you want to tweet while the show is running, Zone Coverage FS is the best way to do that. Which will check in on Twitter at the moment. The phone lines are going to be open for about the next 10-15 minutes before we delve into the interviews. So the numbers are 07 444 048 266. You can Skype me at tsmith. Remember, this phone number, it's mobile number, it's on one of the big networks. So if you've got inclusive minutes, inclusive text, it's not going to cost you a thing. It's just going to come out of your allowance. But if you are phoning from overseas, you're going to incur a massive charge. So the best way would be Skype, and that is tsmith, T-E-E-C-E, Mister. Right then, that is that out the way. How the hell is everyone today? We do have a fantasy league. The guys are talking about that in the fantasy league now. Dave, you didn't get the check your spam folder. If not, I will resend that. So if you want to join the Zone Coverage Football Show fantasy league, just hit me up on Twitter at Zone Coverage FS or Facebook or whatever in the chat room, and I will send an invite to you. David, just check everything. If you've not got your email. It might go in your spam folder. Let me know and I will send you one out during the interviews in a moment. The Big Legowski's also in the chat room as well, so good afternoon, sir. My week, I've not really done a great deal this past week, in all fairness. It's been very, very quiet, so I hope you lot have had a nice week. Pigskin's back, live Pigskin, so that is good. Oh, I do remember last week I was banging on about it's been a while since we'd caught any live Pigskin. Hall of Fame game, stayed up, half time, fast asleep, woke up, game was over. Never mind. Anyway, right, let's get on to this. Let's get into the show today. If you're new to the show, welcome along. We are 49 episodes in. Next week's the Big 50. I need to do something special for the Big 50. Any ideas? At Zone Coverage FS, I am all ears there. We're going to have the NFL news. Check up what's been going on over the course of the last 7 days. We're going to continue with our Inside the Training Camp Luke. Like I said, if you are a new listener, last week we went inside the Bears camp, the Vikings camp. Where else did we go? I have no idea. It was Bears, Vikings, and somewhere else. I mean, mine's gone absolutely blank. Bears, Vikings. I have no idea. I can't remember off the top of my head. But this week we go inside the Washington Redskins camp, the New York Jets camp, and the New England Patriots. So we've got all that coming up. I'm just going to check in now on the chat room. So there's plenty of talk going on in there at the moment. So the Steelers, it was. Yes, the Steelers. Appreciate that, David. Steelers camp. So if you want insight on that, go back and listen. Again, all your links and stuff are on the website, zonecoveragefootballshow.com. So let's get into this news. Plenty to go over from the course of the last 7 days. NFL news. Right then, this happened pretty much as the game sort of got underway in last week's Hall of Fame game. Giants legend Frank Gifford passed away on Sunday, aged 84. He's renowned throughout his 12 years in the NFL, played both sides of the ball, made the Pro Bowl 8 times at 3 different positions, DB, halfback, wide receiver. He then went on into the broadcasting aspect of the NFL, famous for the Monday Night Football. So a legend passed there, one of the sort of like main characters in forming what the NFL is today. So some sad news coming out of the New York Giants, and condolences and best wishes to the Frank Gifford family. It's a bad loss there. Moving on then, the Levante David, Tampa Bay Buccaneers have agreed a 5-year extension. The new contract will pay David $50.25 million, $25.5 million of which is guaranteed. There's certain escalators within this contract as well, so he can actually earn up to pretty much just shy of $55 million. And the Patriots, they've moved on from Matt Flynn and signed former Cardinals quarterback Ryan Lindley to a 1-year deal. Chicago Bears traded guard Ryan Groit to the Pats. I can't remember. I think it was for a late round pick. The legend that is Steve Smith announced on Monday that 2015 will be the last time that we'll get to see him. I'm gutted. I'll be honest. Steve Smith, one of the greatest players to watch over the course of the last 14, 15 years. He might only be small, but man, this guy just plays. That's how everyone should play the game. He's just so intense, and he is the ultimate quote machine. I will sincerely miss Steve Smith Sr., and I do hope he signs off in some just mad rich vein of form. He's an absolute legend, definite Hall of Famer in my mind, definitely. Especially when you factor in the really poor quarterbacks that he's played with throughout the course of his career. So Steve Smith, 2015, it's his swan song. So we need to have a Steve Smith update weekend on the show, I do reckon. Pay our sort of tribute to Steve as he bows out the league. Been an absolute pleasure watching him over the course of the last 14, 15 years. And Pittsburgh Steelers, going back to that Hall of Fame game, they've lost their kicker. Sean Sweetson, yes, he tore his ACL, and the Steelers moved quickly by signing former Saints kicker Garrett Hartley. That'll do. They signed him on Monday, so Sweetson is done and dusted for the year torn ACL. A little over a week ago now, the Seahawks cut veteran tackle Tony McDaniel, and then on Monday he signed a one-year contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's worth up to around about $2.5 million. We mentioned it, I think it was last week or the week before, about the draft. We got the dates, April 28th to the 30th. It was then announced this week that the 2016 draft will once again take place in Chicago. It seems to be a very, very... what's the word I'm looking for? It went down well because it got like a big open fan area in Chicago. It was well received. That's the phrase I'm looking for there. So once again, Chicago is the place to be for the 2016 draft. I need me Benny Hill music right about now because the New York Jets quarterback Geno Smith had his jaw broken and will be out for the next 6 to 10 weeks after being punched by linebacker Ike Empala. He was pretty much cut instantaneously, only for good old Rex Ryan, the now Bills head coach, to sign him. There was a lot of anger on Twitter about this, a lot of people getting on at Rex Ryan, and even Bills fans and Jets fans, and just the usual keyboard warrior stuff. But for me, took a step back. It's the Jets. I'm used to this sort of like clown car now that rolls through town every August to like January because we don't really make the playoffs anymore. And for me, Rex Ryan, I think this is a smart move. He's got an angry ex-employee of the Jets that's maybe going to want to spout off a little bit. It's a new system over in New York. It's a division rival. Milk as much information from this guy while he's still steaming mad at the Jets for being fired as you can. That I can see that side of the coin. I like the move by Rex, so it is what it is. Geno Smith and the money and the punching people is not the greatest idea in the world, granted. But it seems like really, really bizarre. And this has sort of gathered a lot of gathered wheels on momentum over the course of the last few days. No one seems to have stepped in on like Geno's behalf or Ike's behalf and sort of like calmed the situation down. They've all sat there, hands on knees, maybe nudged each other and going, hey up, watch this is going to be fun. And the result was Geno Smith broken jaw and Ryan Fitz magic under centre. So it's going to be an interesting year for me. So no doubt you can tune into my misery every Sunday from 3:30 going forward. Geno, Ryan Fitz magic, they're both equally as bad as each other. You could argue that we're not really in any worse of a situation than we were. So we'll leave all that to one side. It is what it is. Stop being keyboard warriors on Twitter. Get over it. You should be used to it by now. Back to some more positive news. T.Y. Hilton, he got paid. The Colts' third-round pick back in 2012. He has been nothing short of outstanding, and he agreed terms on a 5-year contract extension worth $65 million with $39 million in guarantees. So big move there by the Colts locking up Hilton. Like I say, Hilton has been absolutely outstanding there. Moving on then, Redskins tight end Niles Paul. A lot of rave reviews coming out of him in regards to camp. I do believe he was atop of the depth chart. Suffered a season-ending ankle injury during Thursday's preseason loss to the Browns. So that is tough. That is tough. Jacksonville Jaguars tight end Julius Thomas suffered a fracture in his left hand, and he's expected to miss 6 weeks, miss the remainder of preseason. It's 6 weeks. I'm talking about Bears rookie wide receiver Kevin White. He's set to miss a minimum of 6 weeks as he'll undergo surgery on his shin. He's now been placed on the PUP list. There's speculation that he might miss the entire 2015 season. That is a tough loss for Kevin White. I was talking to a guy on Twitter last night, I forget the name, and we heard about this. The Bears, this sort of shin problem with Kevin White. It's nothing new. We've heard about this from the moment they got to camp, so why wasn't he put in for surgery a month ago? I don't know what's going on there. It's crazy. So why was he not in surgery a month ago? He could maybe been back for the start of the season. Crazy. Some more injury news. It's just injury mad now that Life Pigskin is underway. Vikings, big loss for the Vikings. Right tackle Phil Landholt. He is done for the season after tearing his Achilles last night against the Bucks. Philip Rivers, the crazy bolo wearing tie. Philip Rivers, one of my favourite characters within the NFL. He signed a new contract through 2019. So wherever the Chargers go, Rivers will be. His extension, his 4-year extension, includes $83.25 million in new money. I can't remember what the guarantees was. I didn't write that bit down, but Rivers has got a new 4-year contract, so that's all good. Rams cornerback EJ Gaines, he's done for the season. He's undergone surgery on a Lisfranc injury, so that is your news. Exhausting. Lot of injuries. I've probably missed quite a few injuries. There's a few knocks and bruises, quite a few players missing out on camp, but if I talked about all the injuries, we'd be here all day, and I want to save you from my rambling as much as we can. Just going to check in on Twitter, so feel free to tweet in at Zone Coverage FS. Very, very quiet at the moment. Chat room wise, Cameron's joined the chat room. Good afternoon, Cameron. Hope you're well, buddy. Yes, the Geno Smith story is hilarious, and fantasy teams, Geno's a glass jaw. I like in that name. And the Big Legowski agrees with me that it is another jet circus. Let's all move on. It's nothing new. Right then, Will Davies, as usual, always tweets away, and Cameron did tweet before the show got under running, so do really, really appreciate that. Right then, let's get into the camp previews. We're going to start off with the Redskins. So we had some insight. I've recorded this, I think it was Thursday of this past week, so this was from Mark Phillips of Redskins. It's Capitals Connection podcast, so sit back and enjoy some Redskins insight. I'm going to drop in the chat room, guys, so we'll chat away and sit back and enjoy this. Joining me today on the Zone Coverage Football Show is Mark Phillips. You can find him on Twitter at Redskins Review. He's also co-host on the Redskins Capital Connection podcast, which I highly recommend you guys checking out. Mark, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Doing well, Mark. Thanks for having me. It worked out well since, your name is Mark. It'll be easy to remember.
Yes, I was thinking exactly the same. Mark, for those then that don't know you, give me and the listeners, a little introduction to yourself, how you're writing and then you're podcasting and that. So the floor is yours.
Sure. Well, I've been a fan of the Washington Redskins since I was a boy. So, we're talking about the 70s now, George Allen days. Been following the team since I was a kid. Through the glory days of the 80s and into the early 90s and unfortunately what the team has become in the last several years. But I'm still a huge fan of the football team. We'll never give up on them. And I think maybe it's just because my head still remembers those glory days where you'd get up on a Sunday thinking, how much are we going to win by today? Not, please don't embarrass me today. So in any event, that fandom led to a radio show, which I started hosting in 1999 called Redskins Review here in the Richmond, Virginia area. Did that for about 15 years, and then Chad Ryan of the Redskins Capital Connection contacted me and asked me to be a part of that podcast. I've been doing that for the last year, happy to be a part of it. And when the Redskins training camp moved here to Richmond, Virginia 3 years ago, I started covering that every year. So that's sort of a brief, I guess, bio of me and my history of being a Washington Redskins fan.
Yeah, so we're experiencing the highs, and then what would you? They're not really lows at the moment, are they? Are you sort of like just simmering along, waiting for that next high, or?
Well, I guess what you can say about the Redskins over the years is that for the most part, while they haven't always been a great team, it's been rare that they've been a really bad team like they have been the last couple of years. You had a couple of year stretch there after Joe Gibbs left the first time, where the first year or the 1 year of Richie Pettibone and the first year of Norv Turner that were pretty disastrous. But you could kind of understand that because the team had gotten old and was void of talent. And the Redskins sort of sputtered along for many years in that 6-10 to 9-7 range, where they weren't good, but they weren't terrible either. But as a fan, you had the memories of those great days in the 80s and 90s, so you kept hoping. But these last couple of years, and I guess it all goes back to the moment that RG3 got injured in the playoff game, against Seattle. It's been a disaster ever since then. And there were a couple of years under Jim Zorn that were pretty bad too. But for the most part, the Redskins haven't been a terrible team. So this is sort of, this is unusual ground for the team. Not that we're a powerhouse team, since the early 90s either.
You mentioned RG3 there. We'll get into him a little bit later. But first off, how's camps look this year compared to previous years? Has there been any noticeable changes in how the drills and the session as a whole has been run?
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I think camp this year, from what I've seen, and you can never tell. I mean, 2 years ago, I've been to several camps. I'm like, wow, this looks great. This team looks great. Now, keep in mind, I had in my head a 10-6 playoff season the prior year, and I'm like, man, this team's going to be strong this year. And of course, I completely missed the boat on that one. I would say the attitude is better out there. The mood is noticeably lighter. You can see in certain players there's crystal clear improvement. Niles Paul's been getting a lot of mention. He clearly looks a lot better. It was a big joke on my Redskins radio show for years that whenever people reported to training camp, they'd always added 15 pounds of muscle. Like, how do they know that? How do they know it's 15 pounds of muscle? Does someone get out there and get them in the pool or do the body fat analysis? No one ever added 15 pounds of fat. So, but Niles Paul is noticeably bigger and stronger. He's looking good. I think second year of Jay Gruden, he knows what he's doing a little bit better as a head coach, and I think the coaching staff overall is better than the staff we had last year.
Right then, we'll start off with the secondary unit. It's a unit that lost both of last year's starters. How is that looking now? We've got Deshaun Goldston, Jerron Johnson as well. How's that unit gelling?
Well, Jerron Johnson's been hurt and hasn't been practicing a lot. Duke Ihenachu's really stepped up in that starting safety position, and he probably had the role to lose to begin with, even when Jerron Johnson was signed. I think a lot of people thought, well, he's coming from Seattle. He backed up there, but that's because they had two All-Pro safeties, and he's going to come in and take this job over. And he'll need to get on the field and take that job if he wants. And of course, I'm a fan of Duke Ihenachu because he appeared on the Redskin Capital Connection at one point, so we tend to be partial to him. Yes, I mean, and when you say in the secondary, I'm assuming you're talking about both safety starters.
Yeah.
That's really I hate the term addition by subtraction, but when you lose, Ryan Clark clearly was not the player he once was, and there's even some debate. Ryan Clark played for years with Sean Taylor, and then played for years with Troy Polamalu. Is he just a number two guy and not meant to be a number one guy in your defensive backfield? And that certainly played out last year. And then the other safety was Brandon Merriweather, who had health issues and of course discipline issues with the league as far as hits on the field that were questionable. And every time he'd go out there and hit someone with his helmet, you're like, dude, what are you thinking? You've been suspended for this. This is going to happen. A lot of times the hits didn't look too terribly bad to me, but when you've got that reputation, you've got to play completely above board, and I don't think he ever really got that. I think that Deshaun Goldston will be actually an upgrade at that position. The other position, there's just not enough starting experience for either of the safeties for me to say how it's going to be, but I don't think Ryan Clark really showed us a whole lot last year.
Yeah, you mentioned Deshaun Goldston. He's surely got to bounce back because he was a fantastic player prior to joining the Bucs. He had a couple of down years there, so I've got high expectations for him personally to have a bounce back year with you.
Yeah, I think, I'm hoping that that's the case. That of course, last year, Raheem Morris was the Redskins' secondary coach, and while he was absolutely hilarious to listen to when you're on the sidelines at training camp, the secondary just never really developed or gelled under him. There was just nothing really. Your leadership came probably from D'Angelo Hall, and once he tore his ACL last year, well, that leadership was just gone. Now, of course, to every cloud there's a silver lining with D'Angelo Hall leaving the team last year. That gave Bashaud Breeland a chance to come in, and he looked really good. In fact, there were the two outstanding defensive performances by the Redskins last year were Jason Hatcher week 2 against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Bashaud Breeland on the Monday night game against the Cowboys. He looked absolutely fantastic and just shut down Des Bryant in that game and knocked down the fourth down pass that essentially ended the game. Not essentially, it did end the game. So, even though he's going to be suspended for a game this year and has suffered a mild injury in camp, I expect big things out of him, and I think the defensive back position is going to be better than last year because you've got Chris Culliver in, who's got lots of good experience as a starting quarterback, and D'Angelo Hall will be returning from injury, and then David Amerson, who has been a starter, will be your fourth defensive back. So I think the Redskins have good depth in the secondary, but the bottom line is I'm going to have to see it on the field because that secondary was just a disaster last year.
Yeah, it can only be onwards and upwards in all fairness, can't it, to that unit?
Oh, completely agree with you there. I think the Redskins are going to hope that the front seven can make up for what I still imagine will be some deficiencies in the secondary, even though I think the depth overall is better there. The Redskins added a bunch of beef up front: Terrence Knighton, Ricky Jean-Francois, Ricky Jean-Francois, Stephen Paya. Ryan Kerrigan coming off a Pro Bowl year. They added Junior Gillette, which certainly raised some eyebrows around here because new GM Scott McCloughan made a point in the offseason of saying, he's looking at character guys, and certainly Junior Gillette's character has been called into question in this offseason. But as far as from a football point of view, it's a fantastic move because they signed him for the vet minimum. He's had double-digit sacks last couple of years. So from a football point of view, it makes sense. It's just the character that's going to be called into question if something happens with him during the season. And then, of course, they added Preston Smith in the draft and Trent Murphy, another guy who looks much better this year than he did last year. So that front seven is probably going to have to carry the defense.
You mentioned Junior Gillette. How's he been? We all know the off-the-field sort of noise and what's gone on there. How's he been accepted, by his teammates, and have the fans and media, how have they reacted in Washington to this addition?
Well, the fans are look, Washington Redskin fans are hungry for a winner.
Yeah.
And if Junior Gillette helps bring them that, they'll forgive just about anything short of beating up a woman or a murder on live television. I mean, they'll be fine if Junior Gillette makes the team better. But if there's another off-the-field incident, then this fan base will turn on it quickly because of Scott McCloughan's comments in the offseason about adding character guys. The media in Washington, which is always looking for a story, which I guess doesn't make them different from any other media, they've pounced on this a little bit for the very reasons I've mentioned, that it contradicts what Scott McCloughan said in the offseason. But they also agree it makes fantastic sense from a financial and X's and O's point of view because you're taking virtually no risk. The only risk you're taking with Junior Gillette is that if you do keep him on the roster for week one of the regular season, you are obligated to pay him the salary for the full season. So they would have that $750,000 on the hook. But in football terms, that's a pittance. That's nothing. So now he hasn't been on the field that much because he's recovering from a pec injury that he had last year. So, but I do see him working with the team, and he's clearly very excited to be out there. And if you take what New Orleans Saints fans said about him, says the guy worked hard once he got his contract, and then he got his contract and he wasn't the same guy. Well, clearly he's in a situation now where he's got to work for a contract again. So that would bode well for the Redskins.
Switching gears then, let's move on to the offense. For me, it's an under-the-radar unit. We have Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson. Jordan Reed is a tight end that I like. We know his health and the concussion issues have sort of plagued him throughout his 2 years with the team. How has that unit looked? And particularly, the Jamison Crowden hype, how's that coming along? How is this unit gelled? The unit has done better than I would expect it to do at this point of the season, simply because defenses tend to be ahead of offenses this time of year. And I thought the Redskins' offense looked really good in their practices against the Texans. Against the Texans defense, who do have a pretty good defense. The Texans will have an upper half of the league defense this year. So, and the Redskins, in drills were able to move the ball against them pretty well. Jordan Reed, of course, people are going to need to see him play the full 16 games. He's not going to play in the Redskins' first preseason game, which is tonight. I'm assuming by the time this airs, that game will have already occurred, because he's got some nagging hamstring issues, which will have most Redskin fans rolling their eyes. Does open the door for Niles Paul a little bit to take more command of that job. The Redskins starting receivers, fantastic with Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, who I expect to have a bounce-back year after a down year had last year. Jamison Crowder also won't play tonight because of injuries. You have not heard a lot. He was mentioned in an off-the-field incident after he got drafted by the Redskins, one that he vehemently denies, by the way. So, and there's no video of this one, so we have no idea
if what the complaint is alleging is true or not. But people are very excited about Jamison Crowder here, and I'm disappointed he's not going to be playing tonight. Like, I'm fine with resting Jordan Reed because you want him healthy for the regular season, but I was excited to see what Jamison Crowder could bring to this team, especially from a special teams point of view. So I hope he gets out there. The offensive line, I think people are going to be a little bit worried about the right side of the line because Morgan Moses has really stepped up well at right tackle in camp, and that has moved the number 5 overall pick in the draft, Brandon Scherf, inside to guard, which leads a lot of people to saying, well, you don't spend the number 5 pick on a guard. My attitude's always, look, you put the best 53 guys on the field, and then you put those guys in the best position to succeed. A lot of people said you don't draft a safety at 6 when they took Sean Taylor years ago, so I don't know if I buy that. But the right side of the line is going to be a little bit concerning until we see it in action.
Yeah, you've jumped ahead there. You've beat me to my question. I was going to ask you about the line. Anything else sort of stand out? You mentioned the right side. How's the left side holding up? And the D-line as well. What your thoughts going forward for that unit?
Well, the defensive line, I'll answer that one first. I'm really excited about this defensive line. I mean, there's a lot of beef in there, and they all seem to like each other. I didn't even mention Chris Baker earlier, who was, started for a while on the line last year and just looked really good in camp. But there's so much depth on the defensive line. Those 4 guys that I did mention, they all seem to get along really well, as much as you can see in camp. It seems to be a pretty good natural chemistry. So I've got a lot of high hopes for the defensive line. I think simply because of their size, one of the things about the Redskins in recent years, and it started under Shanahan, was they went for smaller, quicker players, which is great in theory, but late in games, I think those guys tended to wear down a little bit, which won't be an issue now with the size and depth that we have. As far as the offensive line, a lot of people would say, well, the Redskins' offensive line in recent years was Trent Williams and 4 other guys. Now, while certainly I love Trent Williams, I think that's unfair to Corey Lichtensteiger, who's actually a pretty good center. And if they'd moved him to left guard, I'd be fine with that too. I think Corey Lichtensteiger is actually a pretty good NFL offensive lineman. So I would say Trent Williams, Corey Lichtensteiger, and 3 guys would have been an apt description. Sean Laval, who plays the left guard, really struggled first half of last year, looked considerably better in the second half last year. So I'm hopeful that with working for a year with Trent Williams and Corey Lichtensteiger, that side of the line is going to be solid. Again, it's the right side where I'm a little worried. Spencer Long didn't really jump up and grab the position at right guard, which would have left Brandon Scherf at right guard, which would have, allowed Brandon Scherf to stay at right tackle, which was what the team's plan was for him all along, which means that really there's been kind of an odd competition going on in camp between Spencer Long, a guard, and Morgan Moses, a tackle, for who starts on the line, because there was no doubt Brandon Scherf was going to start somewhere on that line.
All right, then, let's move on to this year's rookie class. We've mentioned a couple of names already in Preston Smith, Brandon Scherf, and James Crowder, but any of the later round picks or any of those 3 that we've mentioned that have just jumped off the page to you?
I don't. I mean, obviously Matt Jones, he knocked over a Houston Texans player, and that got a lot of attention. I've not had a chance to watch the Hard Knocks yet. I've DVR'd it. I've not had a chance to watch it, but I know that incident where Matt Jones just ran over a Houston Texan defensive back on Saturday of camp led to the brawl that occurred on Sunday. So clearly he's generated a lot of buzz, and there's a lot of people that believe, while he's not going to supplant Alfred Morris as the starting running back, that he's going to get some carries, and so he's sort of been noticeable out there. I don't put a whole lot of stock just over the years in strong rookie performances in camp, because I believe rookies come into camp and they've got something to prove, and they're going all out from the get-go, whereas veterans tend to pace themselves a little bit more. So I'll be interested to see what some of the rookies do in the preseason games. Particularly I think they'll except for the third one, which is the quote unquote dress rehearsal. They'll get a lot of time, and I'll be interested to see what they do in live action.
Well, the last couple of questions then for you, Mark. Camp standout and disappointment.
Well, the disappointment for me is Spencer Long. As the third-round draft pick last year, I think that's right, the third round, and was really expected to be a mauler and a starter at right guard, and just hasn't taken hold of the position. As far as a standout in camp, that's really tough to say. I'm actually going to say Niles Paul probably has been the most surprising. Again, the Redskins' first depth chart came out the other day, and of course the Redskins team officials say it means nothing, but well, then why put it out if it means nothing? And Niles Paul being ahead of Jordan Reed definitely opened some people's eyes, including mine. And you look at that, and Niles Paul, he was drafted to be a wide receiver on this team. So it's been a long road for him to put on the weight necessary to become a tight end. But as far as a pass catcher and a blocker, he's the complete package. I'm going to give him the edge over RG3. Robert Griffin has actually looked pretty good in this camp, and while I certainly don't expect the 2012 RG3 out there, I think we'll see a better guy than we've seen the last 2 years. And let's put it this way, there was talk, early in the offseason, and Kirk Cousins said, he would want this to be an open quarterback competition. Well, if this had been an open quarterback competition, RG3 won it by a knockout. This hasn't even been close, and while Kirk Cousins is currently the backup, he would have been a candidate for my disappointment in camp so far. I don't think he's looked that great, and I think he's opened the door to to competition from Colt McCoy. I do think ultimately he'll probably hold him off and win that competition. I think the Redskins will keep 3 quarterbacks though, simply because of RG3's injury history and the fact that Kirk Cousins hasn't been overly impressive in camp.
Wow, that does surprise me. You've mentioned RG3 a couple of times there. It's been quiet considering his previous preseason sort of hype and bouncing back from the injuries. So how's he looked as a whole then? Is he improved footwork, his presence in the pocket? Is he looking to make these throws? Is he sort of holding back his usual running and that he's using his legs?
Yeah, in camp, it's so hard because you really can't hit the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So it's easy to have pocket presence then. As Mike Tyson used to say, everyone has a plan until they get hit. Yeah. Well, if you're not going to get hit, you don't have to worry about it. So the answer to your question is yes, his pocket presence has been better. We'll see once he gets into a game how that holds up. I do think his footwork is better, and I don't think he's thinking about it as much. I think it's becoming more instinctive. And I think the speed, while he doesn't have that sprinter speed, I think the speed is there. And the first couple of days of camp, I didn't think he looked that great, but he's just gotten better and better and better. It seems like each practice gets better for him. So I do have high hopes. I don't have high hopes overall for the team in terms of saying this will be a playoff team. A lot would have to break right for the Redskins to be a playoff team. Not saying it's impossible because, in this day and age in football, teams go from last place, to winning divisions at least once a year. It seems to happen in one division. But I don't have high hopes for that. But I do think the Redskins will be a better football team this year.
Right, Mark, final question for you. To give us the fans as a whole and the UK Redskins fans, under the radar guy to keep an eye on throughout this preseason?
Under the radar guy through preseason. I'm drawing a blank on his DeShazo Everett. I was drawing a blank on his name, but I got DeShazo Everett has actually come in at the defensive back position and taken advantage of an opportunity because the Redskins have really had a lot of injury problems at the defensive back position. Of course, D'Angelo Hall got a little dinged up. Obviously, we know about Bashad Breeland. David Amerson missed some time. So DeShazo Everett was brought in during camp. He wasn't even on the team at the start of camp. And he's come in and done pretty well. And I'll be interested to see. I don't know what his chances are to make the team because I think the 4 guys I've mentioned are a lock, and you're going to keep maybe 5 defensive backs. But that's a guy I'm kind of interested in looking at. My partner on the Redskin Capital Connection, Chad, is really high on DeShazo Everett, so he got me looking at him. And so I'll be interested to see what he's going to do, and I think he could surprise.
Excellent. Mark, again, I appreciate you coming on the Zone Coverage Football Show. If you want to follow Mark, you can do it on Twitter at Redskins Review. And again, I highly recommend you lot checking out the Redskins Capital Connection podcast. Mark, really appreciate the time and thank you for coming on the show today.
Mark, thanks for having me on the show.
Anytime.
Take care.
And there we have it, gents. Some excellent insight there from Mark. As you say, as you guys picked up in the chat room there, he was very enthusiastic about Niles Paul. We did record this on the morning before the game that Niles Paul got injured. So some bad news there for Redskins fans. I sent a few invites out to you guys so far in the chat room. If anyone out there wants to be in part in the Zone Coverage Fantasy Football Show, then just let me know via Twitter, the chat room, Facebook, whichever way you can. There's still spots available. And Cameron, I typed in a letter wrong in your email address. That was the error. So I will resend that as we go through the show. So before we jump into the next interview, we're going to go through what's gone on so far in preseason, just a sort of like a brief Cliff Notes version of what happened. There's not a great deal going on, so we'll get into the Thursday night games. First off, my Jets at the Lions, that got called off due to bad weather. I wish it had done, but the Lions kicked the Jets' rear end 23-3. Ryan Fitzmagic, he was in for a series, as was Matt Stafford. Both of them led their respective teams' units on a scoring drive. Stafford hit Tate for a touchdown, and Fitzmagic in the running game marched down the field and come away with a field goal. Other standouts was rookie running back Amir Abdullah for the Lions, who showcased some rather fancy footwork. A jump, cut and go was like, wow, that was for like a 45-yard gain. So definitely keep an eye on Amir Abdullah. It's the first game, so do not get carried away on the hype train just yet. Next up, the Saints and Ravens. The Ravens won this one 30-27. Both Flacco and Matt Schaub. Remember Matt Schaub, the pick six king? They led touchdown drives. Drew Brees sat this one out, so in steps Luke McCown. He obviously got the start. He was 7 of 10, 75 yards and a touchdown. Joe Flacco's his touchdown drive went for 80 yards. That was 16 plays. He completed 5 or 6 passes for 33 yards. Jimmy Graham's replacement, Josh Hill, led the team in receiving. He had 3 receptions for 40 yards. The Packers and the Pats, that also went down on Thursday night. The Packers won this one 22-11. Surprisingly, Tom Brady started this one, and Belichick's usually a proponent of if you don't practice, you don't play. Obviously, Brady was in New York with Saggy Balls, a.k.a. Deflategate, still banging on. So he's only in for the one series. In stepped Jimmy Garoppolo. He played almost 3 quarters. He was 20 of 30 for 159 yards, threw 1 interception as well, and he was sacked 7 times. Starting line for the Pats, seconds, wasn't that great in all fairness. Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, he was 11 of 19 for 117 yards. Jonas Gray, who we will start week 1 at the running back position for the Patriots in place of the suspended LeGarrette Blount, he rushed for 74 yards and a touchdown. On then to the Redskins at the Cleveland Browns. The Redskins beat the Browns 20-17. Josh McCown led the team on a scoring drive on its opening possession. RG3 was in for a couple of possessions. He went 4 of 8 for 36. No touchdowns, mainly thanks to a Pierre Garçon drop. Dolphins at the Bears. Bears won this one 27-10. Ryan Tannehill looked very, very sharp throughout this opening drive. He was 6 of 7, 56 yards on a touchdown. Same cannot be said for Josh Freeman. What is going to happen? The Bears actually got rid of Josh Freeman, then had him back a couple of days later, and it's safe to say his career is going to be done and dusted after preseason. He was a miserable 5 of 16 for 76 yards and a pick. Running back Lamar Miller for the Dolphins looked great. Cutler, music to Bears fans' ears coming up. Cutler was turnover free. He was 4 of 7 for 42 yards. No Alshon Jeffrey or Kevin White. Obviously, we know Kevin White's now undergoing surgery on his shin. Cowboys at the Chargers. I do believe this was the last Thursday night game. The Chargers were victorious here, 17-7. Rookie Melvin Gordon made his debut, 6 carries, 11 yards. However, it was Danny Woodhead. Music to Chargers fans here. Danny Woodhead's return. His first game since September. 8-yard touchdown run. So that's great news there for Chargers fans. No Romo for the Cowboys. Brandon Weeden was it. Went 4 of 5, 42 yards and a fumble. Tight end Gavin Escobar may be one to watch going forward, especially fantasy-wise next week, fellas. Gavin Escobar, he was targeted 7 times. He reeled in 5 of those targets for 47 yards. And those were your Thursday night games. So checking on the Friday night games after we've caught up with a familiar friend, Russ Goldman. He's been on the show. We had him on for the Super Bowl special. Russ Goldman, host of the Patriots 4th and 2 podcast, pretty well known amongst us NFL UK fans. So we got Russ on. We actually spoke for a lengthy 50 minutes, but I'm not going to play your 50-minute interview, so don't worry. I think we got about 16, 17 minutes. So sit back and enjoy some Patriots insights. Here we go with Russ. Joining me today on the Zone Coverage Football Show is Russ Goldman. He's host of the Patriots 4th and 2 podcast, and you can find him on Twitter at Russ_Goldman. Russ, absolute pleasure to have you back on the Zone Coverage Football Show.
Thanks for having me on back, Mark. I really enjoy your show, and it's a privilege to be talking to you today.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. Like we said before we got into the recording, well known amongst the UK fans now. For those of the stragglers that we've yet to pick up, Russ, give us a little intro into who is Russ Goldman? How are you associated with the Patriots?
I'd be happy to share that with you. Listen, I've been a Patriots fan for over 40 years. I live a stone's throw from Gillette Stadium, about 10 minutes away. And it really is wonderful to be a Patriots fan now. Again, growing up, it wasn't the greatest because there were many down years, but ever since Bill Belichick and Tom Brady arrived, things have been very different, and it really is a wonderful thing to be a Patriots fan. I have a great Patriots podcast called Patriots 4th and 2, which you can listen to on blogtalkradio.com. I'm associated with a great website called PatsFans.com. We are the official podcast for PatsFans.com, and what's great, Mark, if you're a Patriots fan, I've been doing this. It's a ritual I do every single Sunday. I drive by Gillette Stadium, and I actually tweet out and put on Facebook just pictures of Gillette Stadium because I'm lucky enough to live 10 minutes away that I can go down, take a picture, and share it with the Patriots fans all over the world. And, again, it's funny. I've been doing this drive-by since 2003, since that second championship season, and I want to say since 2011 I started doing this thing that I actually post pictures, and it's become this ritual that many fans enjoy. They actually like the pictures, so it's just something that I do, and it's just my way of giving back to Pats fans all over the world.
Yeah, I've seen you posting the pictures. You've also taken up to posting a few videos on, is it Periscope as well? I've seen you post.
Yeah. Listen, Periscope is a fairly new technology, and it really is wonderful that now I can go down to Gillette Stadium and not just tweet out pictures. I can actually do a short video of me being there.
That's cool. It gives sort of a sense of a feel for those so far away. Right then, Russ, let's get into training camp. We all know about the outside noise. We're going to stay as far away from that as we can. I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right then, what's the sort of overall feel of training camp been this year? How's it looked?
Training camp's been very interesting. Listen, I'm lucky that again through a corporate partnership of my wife, I get VIP access to Patriots training camp. It's wonderful, and I get to take my Patriots 4th and 2 co-hosts with me. We get to watch the majority of these training camps, so we get really good seating. So I get a good view of it. And the first thing I just want to mention that has really stuck out, the player that has been the best player in training camp without a shadow of a doubt has been Malcolm Butler. Malcolm Butler has taken what he did at the Super Bowl and basically ran with it. Now, I'm not saying that Malcolm Butler is going to be a replacement for Darrelle Revis because that's unfair to Malcolm Butler.
Yeah.
But what I will tell you is that he has, he's lived up to everything that I've seen from him last year at training camp and just taking it to basically the next step. He's consistent. Every play, he's around the ball. He's doing exactly what you saw in the Super Bowl. He's breaking up plays, and the confidence level is definitely there. And, listen, they have him set up as that left corner, and, I'm feeling pretty confident that he can actually be the starter at left corner. That's been the biggest issue going into training camp. Well, who's going to fill the shoes of Darrelle Revis? And we all know that that's impossible to do. But you want to know who's going to be that starter. And I'm here to tell you, I believe it's going to be Malcolm Butler.
Ah, excellent. Opposite then, that was my sort of first question really, this cornerback position. You mentioned Revis and co moving on. Who's going to be playing opposite Butler then? Is it Logan Ryan? Is he penciled in? Is he the starter, or Bradley Fletcher?
That's a great question. And again, there's a good battle going on there. A player that actually had shined early in camp, but he just got hurt, was Terrell Brown, who last season played for the Oakland Raiders. And before that, I believe, played for the 49ers. He's actually looked really good. And in the beginning of training camp, he was on the right side. Malcolm Butler was on the left. And Logan Ryan was actually shifted into as your slot corner. But Logan Ryan could be your right corner as well. So there's a good amount of competition going on there, and along with Bradley Fletcher, who's looked decent as well. There's again, there's no superstar at the cornerback position, but there's good competition. And what actually has excited me is watching the front seven. The front seven of the Patriots defense, I think, is going to be their strength, and I guess you could say the secondary now. Not that it's going to be a weakness, but it's going to take won't be the leader, when it comes to the defense. It's going to be more about that front seven. Jabal Sheard has looked very good in camp. He actually looked good in the preseason game. He really has shined, and again, the rookies actually shined as well in the first preseason game. I'm talking about Geno Grissom and Trey Flowers. They really have put in a good effort. We also have Malcolm Brown. There's a good mix there in that front seven. Dante Hightower should be back in time for the first game, along with, again, Gerard Mayo has come back, and you got Jamie Collins. That front seven, I truly believe, will be the leaders of that group now.
Well, you mentioned the front seven a couple of times there, Ross. What sort of impact is the absence of Vince Wilfork since he's moved on to the Texans? Who's stepping up into that role? Because they are some big shoes to fill, literally and figuratively.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, I think this is going to be a team effort. You still have Alan Branch. Mm-hmm. You also have Silver Saliga, who has filled in years past for Vince. He's still there. And you also see rookie Malcolm Brown have an impact in that role. So I don't think that you can actually replace him with one player. I think you're going to see a rotation, along with Dominic Easley, who they're moving all around the line. So I think Bill Belichick has taken the adage that you can't replace Vince. You basically have to change a little bit how you're doing things. And I think Patriots fans are going to see a little bit different style from the Patriots defense. I think they're going to be more aggressive, and I don't think that you're going to have that one run stuffer that you've had in years past. I think it's going to be by committee, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, should be interested going forward. Then let's sort of change gears here. Then let's move on to the offense. Like I said, the outside noise to one side. Everyone's curious about Jimmy Garoppolo. How's he looked? Has he stepped forward into the role, or the players sort of gathering around him? Is he commanding the huddle?
It's very interesting to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo because I was at Patriots minicamp, and Jimmy Garoppolo, I thought, shined. Again, I kept tweeting out that he took that step up, that next step, that second-year step. Well, ever since I've been watching him at training camp, it's pretty much been up and down. It's been very similar to how it was last training camp. Again, he's holding on to the ball way too long, and that's been a common criticism of Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a second-year quarterback. He's learning how to be a quarterback, and I think we're seeing the growing pains. There have been some good moments, and there have been some bad moments, and we also saw that in the first preseason game. And it's I wouldn't say it's troubling. I would just say that it's a work in progress. I'm hopeful that he will be able to grow into the position, but it's been very uneven from him so far. Like I said, I will see moments that he looks like Tom Brady out there, and then I'll see other moments and say he looks like a rookie quarterback or a second-year quarterback. Again, his reads are not quick enough, and that's something that if you're down with me at training camp, you will hear me yelling, "Get the ball out, get the ball out, get the ball out." I am constantly saying that with Jimmy Garoppolo, and that basically should tell you what's going on there. He's not reading the defenses quick enough, and it could just be the progression of a quarterback. But again, I'm watching this, and I'm one that killed that killed Ryan Mallett. I would be killing Ryan Mallett for the same things. I would be saying Ryan Mallett is too slow to get the ball out. I do think that the quarterbacks are different because I could see more progression with Garoppolo. But if I'm being honest here, again, if I'm going to kill Ryan Mallett, I have to be as critical of Jimmy Garoppolo. And like I said, there have been some very good moments, but he is really holding on to the ball way too long. And I'm just hoping that we see some progression as the preseason continues.
Yeah, something I'm going to keep an eye on now you've mentioned that, Russ.
Absolutely.
Another sort of loss then for the offense. We all know about the weapons, but running back wise, Shane Vereen, so one of the other heroes of the Super Bowl, he's since moved on. Who's stepping up there? We know about Jonas Gray, how he turned up late one day and we didn't really see anything from him since. LeGarrette Blount, he's got a game suspension. So who's taking the reins at the running back position?
Jonas Gray actually looked very good in the first preseason game. He lost a little weight. James White looks like the type of running back that, again, he's not going to be your inside the tackle running back, but he could be your Shane Vereen. The issue I have with him is he's good catching the ball outside of the backfield. The issue is he still goes down very easily, and that's something that Shane Vereen was a little bit better at. He does go down very quickly, so that's something to watch. And, of course, you also have Brandon Bolden as well. I'm not too worried about the running back position because, again, like I mentioned, long-term, LeGarrette Blount really looks like he's in good shape.
Yeah, so Blunt's going to be the guy as soon as he's back from that suspension. Right,
yep.
Then, moving on then. Last couple of questions for you, Russ. This year's rookie class as a whole, how's that sort of looked? Any high hopes or any disappointments?
I have high hopes for several of these players. I would say Trey Flowers and Geno Grissom in the defensive line. I have high hopes for both of them. And like I said prior, they both shined in the first preseason game. Those are two players I'm really looking to see how that they can step up and be part of the rotation. Malcolm Brown, again, we still need to see a little bit more of him. I think he struggled against the run in the first preseason game because, again, we're talking about the replacement for Vince Wilfork, so he's a player to watch as well. So I would say those three players are the rookies that I am really focused on because what's interesting about the rookie class, the majority of them were brought in to basically help the defense. But again, on the flip side, there are a couple rookies also to watch that one could be potentially starting on the offensive line, and that's Trey Jackson. Trey Jackson is a guard that they brought in from Florida State. He played with Brian Stork at Florida State. So he's someone to watch. He could be your starting right guard. And Shaq Mason, they brought in from Georgia Tech. They drafted, and he could be your left guard. I don't know if he'll be starting, but again, these are just names of players that have really stood out so far in training camp. And again, the rookie class so far has looked really good.
Cool. You mentioned a few of the names that have stood out in camp, Butler and a couple of the rookies there. Is there anyone else that stood out? And we have to play devil's advocate as well, Russ. Anyone that you've had high hopes of going into the camp, but have slightly disappointed you?
That's a great question. I will tell you a player that has been a disappointment has been Josh Boyce. Now, Josh Boyce played in the first preseason game, and I got to be honest with you, he played horrible. And he really had a chance to shine with Tom Brady and then with Jimmy Garoppolo and just literally dropped the ball. I mean, dropped the ball several times. If you check to see how many targets he had, he played a terrible game. And he has this opportunity because of all the injuries in camp to the wide receivers. So he's been a disappointment. He's actually looked decent in training camp, but in the first preseason game, he looked horrible. A player that, again, that we all have high hopes for, but is injured again, would be Aaron Dobson. Now, Aaron Dobson's actually looked good in training camp, but he got injured again. So this is a player that actually is a concern because both of these wide receivers, I think this is their last chance with the New England Patriots this training camp, and if they don't step up and can get on the field, in the case of Aaron Dobson, you might not see them on the when the season actually begins. So when I look at disappointments, I would say it would be these two wide receivers, one injury related and one playing related.
Wow, interesting to keep forward then. Last question I've got for you then, Russ, says, who should Patriots fans be keeping an eye on through the rest of pre-season? Who is an under-the-radar guy? It could be a name that we're all familiar with, who had a down season, or just a complete unknown that's come into camp.
Another great question. I would say, again, I wouldn't call him an unknown, but a player that I think is going to be a difference maker is going to be defensive end outside linebacker Jabal Sheard. And they got him from the Cleveland Browns, free agent from the Cleveland Browns, and he shined when he was with the Browns. They changed defensive coordinators, and his role changed. But with the Patriots, I think you're going to see him being part of this rotation with Rob Ninkovich and Chandler Jones, because part of the problem that the Patriots have had is that those two players wear down over the course of the season because they're used so much. Well, Jabal Sheard now can really give them another option coming off the edge. And what's great about him is that if you want to start him, you could start him because he's really a three-down player. He's actually very good against the run as well. So the Patriots, believe it or not, I think upgraded themselves by bringing in another defensive end / outside linebacker. And on the flip side of looking at losing someone like Darrelle Revis and Brandon Bronner, I think they did themselves a huge service by bringing in Jabal Sheard.
Excellent. Definitely a name to keep an eye on going forward. If you want to follow Russ on Twitter, you can do so at Russ_Goldman. Again, check out his podcast, Patriots 4th and 2, and head over to www.patsfans.com. Russ, an absolute pleasure. Nice to have you back on the show. I'm sure we'll revisit this again as we progress through the season. Thanks for coming on the Zone Coverage Football Show.
Anytime, Mark. You just let me know, and I'll be there for you.
So there we have it. Like I said, I was talking to Russ around about 45, 50 minutes, so we managed to get like 15 minutes worth of football chat. We were talking about when he was over for the NFL London game when the Patriots were over a couple of years ago. We were on about the Tube and his love for Fulham FC and that. So it's always great to have Russ, and I'm sure you'll agree. We'll move on now. We'll get into the Friday night pre-season games that went down. First up was the Titans at the Falcons. The Falcons won this one 31-24. Marcus Mariota's debut within the NFL is a bit of a struggle. There's been a lot of sort of made around about the fact that he had not thrown an interception during camp. That sort of bit him on the rear end. Then as he had a pick and a fumble in his first two series. He seemed to shake it off and ended up going 7 for 8 for 94 yards in the end. Matt Ryan, he was in for a series. He was perfect, 6 of 6 for 86. Julio Jones had 4 receptions for 61 yards, including a 13-yard touchdown. Zach Mettenberger, he also come in for Mariota. He was 8 of 11 for 129 yards, and he also threw a pick. On then to the Panthers and the Bills, a game that I randomly watched the highlights of. Decent game, actually. 25-24 win for the Panthers. Matt Castle, he got the start. Matt Castle looked okay, in all fairness. He looked calm in the pocket, went through his reads quick, was efficient, liked his footwork. He ended the night 7 of 8 for 45 yards. Tyrod Taylor grabbed the sort of headlines, in fairness. This is how you'd expect Johnny Manziel to play. He was a great dual threat, but he's going to get hurt. He really is. He was bailing out on the pocket. Yeah, he's got the legs and that, but you can't do that every other play. Tyrod Taylor, he was 5 of 8 for 48, rushed for 47 yards. Cam Newton, he was 5 of 10, 83 yards, a touchdown pass to Calvin Benjamin. Next up is Pittsburgh Steelers at the Jags. Jags sneaked this one 23-21. Big Ben hit Martavis Bryant for a 44-yard touchdown on the opening drive as he completed all 3 of his passes for 59 yards. Blake Bortles, he ran in for a touchdown. He was 11 of 14, 118 yards. He had 3 drops. There's a game I also watched. Blake Bortles looked all right, in fairness. The drops absolutely killed him. Otherwise, his numbers would have been through the roof, in fairness. He played most of the first half. Steelers kicker news, Garrett Hartley, he made both of his kicks. Giants at Bengals then. Bengals won this one 23-10. Andy Dalton was also perfect, 3 of 3, 31 yards, including a touchdown pass to Mohamed Sanu, and he was done. As impressive as the Bengals offense was, the Giants wasn't. Eli Manning played well into the second quarter, completing half of his passes, 4 of 8 for 22 yards. No Victor Cruz in this game either. Rams at Raiders, this was an 18-3 victory for the Raiders. Carr and Cooper, get used to that, Carr and Cooper. These pair connected 3 times for 22 yards. Carr finished 6 of 9 for 43 yards with a pick. Nick Foles, he went 3 of 5, 69 yards. No Todd Gurley for the Rams, and Trey Mason only had 2 carries for a total of 6 yards. Broncos, I can't remember what it's called. Seahawks, Seahawks. The Broncos won this one 22-20. No Manning, so Brock Osweiler got the start. And Brock Osweiler, I was impressed. Brock Osweiler, he was 15 of 20, 151 yards, a touchdown. Most of Seattle's first team D sat this one out in fairness. Russell Wilson completed only 1 pass for 12 yards, and that was, of course, to Jimmy Graham. Again, it's preseason, don't read too much into these. Injury-free is what you want. But a good positive for the Seattle Seahawks, Ruka Tyler Lockett. Go back and watch the highlights of this game if you can. This guy is fast. He was exceptional in the return game. He had a 103-yard kickoff return, and that topped off his 46-yard return that he had during the first quarter of the game. So those were your Friday night games. We will go through the Saturday night games after we get to our last and final interview with Chris Nimbley from the New York JetsInsider.com. So I'm going to drop back in the chat room and while you guys listen to me and Chris talk Jets misery, basically. So this is like the comedy section of the show. So sit back and enjoy. Joining me today on the Zone Coverage Football Show is Chris Nimbley. He's the editor and writer of JetsInsider.com. You can also find him on Twitter at @CNimbley. Chris, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How's it going?
Very good, very good. I'd say we know each other from my old Jets venture, so it's a pleasure to have you on board the Zone Coverage Football Show. For those people that are unfamiliar with you, give us a little insight into who is Chris Nimbley and JetsInsider.com, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Well, Jets Insider, we work, we have full access and fully credentialed to go to practice, training camps, and then go to the games and everything as well. We try to offer a little bit different insight than some of the other traditional beats. Try to do a little more stuff. It's a fan-friendly website, so we kind of gear it a little bit more and give you a little more in-depth stuff that some other stuff sites don't touch on. We interact a lot more with the fans and get their views, what they want to hear about, and try to put it out that way, gear it a little more towards the fans instead of just everybody overall. But, like I said, we're fully credentialed, so we're there all the time, and we just try to, give the fans what they want, what they need, because, I grew up reading the internet or newspaper, was only getting like a piece of the puzzle, especially this time of year in training camp. So we try to gear it towards those people who want a little more in depth, a little more stuff right there that they can actually feel like they're getting something from and actually know what to do with the information that they're getting.
Like I said to you before we jumped into this, you're sort of my go-to for all the Jets news. We've been sort of like communicating for the last couple of years. Excellent follow on Twitter at @CNimbley. The website, again, JetsInsider.com. I highly recommend you check that out. So, all right, Chris, let's get into we'll get into this the camp first, because there's a few issues that have caught the headlines over the course of the past couple of days. But
yes.
How's this camp differed from what you've seen under the previous regime, Rex Ryan and co? What's different with Todd Bowles and his approach?
Yeah, the biggest thing that jumps out at you at camp is the way that the practices are run. Everything just kind of goes a lot smoother. There's a lot less wasted time, a lot less downtime. They have multiple things going on at the same time on different fields. Not that Rex didn't do that too, because he did, but with Rex, there would always be bigger lulls in between action. There would always be sometimes in between stuff, players seem to be confused as to where they were going, which drill they were going in. And some of that is about the different ways that Rex would use certain players, where they'd be playing multiple positions. And Bowles has players doing that too. You see someone like Quentin Coples will be in the D-line drills, and then he'll go to the linebacker drills. But those players seem to know where they're going at all times. They always seem to know what it is. Everything seems to run a lot smoother. The communication among the players is a lot better than it has been under Rex. We'll end up seeing, as the season goes on, what type of effect that has, but it's definitely noticeable, and pretty much every reporter that's out there has commented on it. It's just really apparent that everything, he seems to have a little bit more of his thumb on the issues, and he's in control of everything. And part of that is also probably just some of the players sitting there thinking, okay, this is a new coach. I got to make sure that I let him know what I'm about and that I'm not screwing up. But some of it was just Rex was a little lax on those types of things, and that's wasn't as high on his list. But Bowles is definitely putting a heavy emphasis on that.
That's good to hear. A far cry from the shenanigans that happened under Rex then.
Yeah.
Right then, we'll start off with the secondary. Obviously, we all know that Revis and Crow are back now, but I'm curious about the safeties. Marcus Gilchrist has come over as a free agent pickup via the San Diego Chargers. The Louisville slugger Calvin Pryor struggled throughout his rookie season. How has this safety unit looked, and what's the depth like at the corner beyond Revis and Crow?
Well, the safety, you saw a little bit with the game against the Lions. The big concern with the safeties, and it's hard to see in camp because most of the throws the quarterbacks have been kind of sidelines or shorter intermediate routes. But the weakness of that defense right now seems to be the intermediate routes right above the linebackers and below the safeties in this middle of the field there. Can they come up and make sure that they can hold that area down and then still not end up letting somebody on the outside go and burn them deep? So in training camp, we haven't really seen that tested too much. We did see the lines tested a little bit last night, and they took advantage of it. Against the run, though, the safeties have been great in all camp. They step up, they fill those lanes with a quickness. But in the passing game, we're going to need to see a little bit more from them there. And Calvin Pryor still has some ability, can still be that heat-seeking missile, but he still kind of finds himself out of position a little bit every now and then, taking a wrong angle. So we'll have to see how that is. Gilchrist his teammates are raving about him, his intelligence, his football IQ, the way he is when they get into the meeting rooms and they break stuff down. So he lacks a little bit of that total range that you would typically like in having as a free safety, which, to be fair, he's not really that free safety. But he is definitely a solid safety. He can help in a lot of areas. He just kind of lacks that range. But you're going to see them the two of them kind of switch back and forth, where one play, I think, someone will be more in the box, the strong safety, and another one they'll have more of the center field role, and then the next play they might switch it up. So you're going to see a little bit of mixing it up that way. As far as the corners with the depth there, like you said, they got Revis, they got Cromartie, they also added Buster Screen from Cleveland, who's going to be their starting nickel. And Cromartie is the iffy part right there, because he's been getting beat a lot in training camp. And, I mean, he's Antonio Cromartie. He is a really talented, athletic person, but he can definitely get beat. He's definitely susceptible to getting beat. But if something happens and Bowles feels he needs to move on from there, there is a lot of depth there. They do have Marcus Williams, who has had a great training camp. He gets a little grabby at times, but he has probably been the standout in the secondary as far as camp. I mean, Revis, obviously, he's just Revis, but you expect that. So it's kind of like you don't get too caught up in it because he's just Revis. But Marcus Williams has definitely stood out. We saw Dexter McDougal had a couple really nice plays last night. He gave up that one touchdown that was just a really perfect pass, but he had a couple deflections. He's looked really good in camp. He's getting back healthy. He's really physical and aggressive. they have some other players there. Darren Wall's still on the roster, so they definitely have some depth there that they can go to if they need to make a move from Cromartie, which, to be honest, wouldn't surprise me at some point in the season if you see Bowles go in a different direction there.
Yeah, we all know how Crow is. It's either feast or famine, isn't it, with Crow? He's exceptional one week. The week after, he's getting burnt for a vast amount of yards. Yeah. Right, let's move on then to the D-line. Well, the D-line's pretty much set in all fairness. I've got no concerns about that. But just behind the D-line, this linebacking group, Quentin Copples, what's happening with Copples? He's been sort of like a mystery for the last 3 or 4 years on this Jets team. How's he looked? What's his role going to be? And the group as a unit, what have you seen from that?
Yeah, with Copples, you're going to have him playing a similar role that he did last year under Rex.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to see him rushing the passer a lot more. He's going to mostly be that outside linebacker. He is listed as the starting outside linebacker on the depth chart, and that's going to be mostly his role. I'm sure when Bowles goes to some 4-3, you might see him get on the line and do that, where I do think that's where he's most dangerous and where he can be most disruptive. But with the way the line is now, they don't really need him there. And a lot of the stuff with Copples with Rex, I would get people telling me all the time about how Copples was too slow going after this and that, when really he was just playing run gap assignment. So he wasn't supposed to be running after the rushing the passer. He was just supposed to kind of fill the edge and then sit there and wait to see if whether it was running back or whether it was a quarterback who was dancing around and then wanted to take off. So he would just kind of go sit to the edge and just sit there and wait. And then, of course, Rex also had him doing the stuff last year where he went out and he would jam receivers and stuff. I don't think you can expect to see too much of that this year, but you're going to see him in that same outside linebacker role, but he's probably going to be doing a lot more rushing. And that's good news for Jets fans because that's what he can do best, and that's where he's going to excel.
Yeah, I think sorry to jump in there, Chris. It's something I've been waiting for from Copples. We've seen like the odd flash here and there, but he's never jumped off the page consistently, has he?
No, he hasn't. And again, a lot of that is just because of the way that he's used.
Yeah.
And Rex is was always very big on that. He likes to have his outside linebackers to set the edge or to fill gaps there and to drop back in coverage. And you're going to see Copples drop back in coverage. Because you have to do that. You can't just have him rush every play. Otherwise, the offense is going to know that's what he's doing every play, and they're going to be prepared for it and ready for it. So you're going to still see them mix it up, but it's not going to be like go out and cover and jam the number one receiver type of stuff. But I think you're going to definitely see more just overall just rushing the passer. He's going to send him more. Where Rex, sometimes it looked like he might have been sending him, but he really wasn't sending him. So you're going to see more of that, and I would expect it to definitely be noticeable this year. That Jets fans should probably be ready to be happy and impressed with that.
Anything else then from this linebacking group? Jason Babin obviously still there. Trevor Riley made a couple of nice plays last night as well. He caught the eye. Demario Davis is always sort of, again, like Copples, sort of solid, doesn't really jump out. Calvin Pace, we know, is the heartbeat, really.
Right, yeah. Calvin Pace is going to, he's Calvin. He's going to do what he's going to do. And that's a kind of situation there that Copples kind of mirrors him. Yeah. I've been telling this and getting into debates with Jets fans about this for years because a lot of his responsibility is about just filling gaps and not rushing. So the same type of things can be applied to him. With the linebackers unit as a whole, you got, like you said, Demario. Demario, he's so fast. He's got a lot of ability, but he can get himself out of position at times. He's a little lacks coverage ability as well. David Harris, we know David Harris is still great against the run.
Yeah.
He's an underrated and an underused blitzer. When they send him to rush the passer, he does a great job shooting up the middle, finding a little crease and going. But Rex didn't have him do it too much. I do think you're going to see Bowles deciding to do that a little bit more, so you could maybe anticipate getting some more pressures, at least from David Harris that way. Trevor Riley has had a really good camp. Now, most of what he's doing is against the twos and the threes on the offense as well. But he had a pretty good night against the Lions too. He flashed and made some plays, but he has definitely stood out. And Babin is still there. He's still good. There's a lot of depth there, but that is definitely probably the weakest overall unit of the Jets defense. And it's really against the run they're going to be fine. Against the short stuff they're going to be fine, but having to cover anything over top of them is going to be tough. If a short crossing pass comes under David Harris, he's going to identify it and he's going to go attack it. But if they go over the top of him, he tends to get lost like that.
It's going to be interesting then if you add that to the equation with the struggles with the coverage from the safeties as well. That's sort of like deep third or the centre of the field. That's going to be an issue all season.
Yeah, that's the one area of the defense, that whole right around the middle linebackers to in between the safeties. That's the weak spot, and that's the area that I think offenses will try to attack the most. We'll see if they can figure something out there and what they end up doing. Bowles does like to play a lot of defensive backs, though, so you might see them not – they have a base 3-4 package, but you might only see one or two linebackers out there, and they could have 6-7 defensive backs out there at times too. So that could mix it up and make it much better for coverage and everything that way.
Right. Somehow, Chris, we've managed 15 minutes or so before talking about what's just all over the place at the moment. Geno Smith, Ike Empoli, however you say his name, the absolute mess that went on there. This quarterback situation, I don't feel we're any worse off personally. Geno and Fitzpatrick, in my eyes, are equally as bad as each other. We sort of know what happened. If you've got any more insight into this, what's the sort of feel within camp? What's been the overall reaction? Because from an outsider looking in, it seems utter madness, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that's definitely what it seems like, and that's definitely what it is. As far as the reaction, it happened on the last day at camp before they went to Detroit. So it happened the morning before practice. And then what the Jets do during training camp is, while practice is going on, the PR staff comes around and they ask all the reporters to give 2 or 3 names of players you want to talk to request. And then after practice is over, they bring them to you and you get to talk to them one-on-one individually. That practice, they didn't do that. They didn't want anybody going to their guys and asking, for the inside scoop of what really happened. They just brought out a handful of players to speak to everybody, and then also the players that they knew would just kind of give the straight down the middle answers. They wouldn't feed into anything and get into the gossipy part of that. And the next day they had off, and then they had the game last night, and now today they have off. So we haven't really had a chance to get to talk to the players, to get any of that stuff. We will tomorrow. Saturday and Sunday they have practice, so we'll be able to do a little bit more of that. And you hear some of the reports coming out. There's some conflicting things, and I keep seeing and hearing people say, well, you're not having anybody come out and defend Geno, which, you're not right now, but also they're not really talking. So there's not really an opportunity for people to do that either. And, the fact that Bowles went and cut Ike right away is, that says a little something. And regardless of who's wrong, you're going to get cut doing that. You can't go punching your starting quarterback in the locker room. A coach isn't going to care if it's justified or not. You just punch the starting quarterback, he's out for 6 to 10 weeks. That hurts the entire team. So it's definitely an interesting thing, of course. With the Jets, it always is. And it's crazy, and it's just one thing after another here. But that's the way it is, and especially with this team, just it's a horrible situation because Geno did look really good throughout camp. It is just camp; he can't get hit and everything, but he has been much more protective of the ball. He's been smarter. He's been making better decisions, and it did look like going into year 3. The year that we used to be this is the year that we can actually start giving quarterbacks some responsibility. So it looked like he might have been making some progress, and now he's got this setback. And then, again, who knows how the teammates feel about him. If it was completely justified, then maybe they're just not ever going to be fully on board with him again. It's just a mess, and you kind of got to feel bad for him. And the story of, what happened exactly with the plane ticket and then Gino having a friend dying, and so he wasn't able to go. It's all just some big convoluted mess, and it's really hard to sit here and say I know this is what happened and this is how you should feel about it. It's just a jumble, and it's really tough to sit here and try to get a hold on it at this point.
I can imagine you're going to have fun with that then for the next couple of days, trying to unravel that even further.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Right, we'll leave that to one side. I think that's been done to death. Right, this Changeli offense, what can we expect then this upcoming year? And also, how's this O-line looked?
The offensive line, as far as I still have concerns with their pass protection.
Yeah.
And, we know 4/5 of what that O-line is going to be. We're still not sure what the right guard is going to be, although it is starting to look more and more like it will be Willie Colon. I still have a little bit of a hard time accepting and believing that, because he's good against the run, but there's just so many penalties, so many different issues there. And he's getting older and older, obviously, but it's just that's the weak spot. And against the pass rush, that's where the problem is. And whether it was Gino, whether it was Fitzpatrick, that was going to be an issue. But as far as their run blocking, they're definitely doing a great job in camp. They did a good job of it last night. They are going to be able to run the ball. They're just going to need to make sure they get some type of adequate passing game going. And with the weapons that are there now, Decker, Marshall, Curley, when Devin Smith comes back, if Chris Uwosu, who has had a great training camp, if he can come back from his concussion and contribute, there's plenty of weapons there. It's just the problem with Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick knows what he's doing. He's more confident. He's masters the playbook much more than Gino, but he just doesn't have the arm talent that Gino does. And he can't make all the throws that Gino makes. Now, some of that could still be a little bit of him coming back from his injury himself, but there's so many times in camps where he tries to throw the ball 15, 20 yards down the field, and the ball just kind of hangs there in the air. And that's going to be a problem. And that's the reason why the coaching staff wanted to go with Gino, because he has the arm talent and ability to make those throws. It was all just mental with him. With Changeli, I think a lot of the players are saying it's not that different than a lot of the stuff that Marty Morningwig did, but it is a lot less complicated, especially from the quarterback. There's a lot less that they ask the quarterback to do to be on top of everything. It's just a lot more simplified for them. So I think you're going to see him mix up things a lot. He's going to have to rely on the running game a lot, and they're going to have to do a lot of short and intermediate passes, and just if Ryan Fitzpatrick's the starter all year, that hurts when Devin Smith comes back, because they got him to be that deep play threat down the field, and Fitzpatrick's not going to be able to do that as well. So they're going to have to reel it in a little bit, kind of similar to what they did those first 2 years of Sanchez and Rex, where you didn't really stretch the field downfield too much. It was just run short passing game. But, with the weapons they have, I think they can, and the defense that they have, I think they can, be able to compete and still make for an interesting season. And if Fitzpatrick's the starter, they're probably not making the playoffs, but those last couple of weeks of the season, they could still be in contention. And after the season they had last year, that should be exciting for Jets fans to at least those last couple games matter.
Yeah, we need that. We need to go into, like you say, into December. We're still something to play for. But then, last couple of questions for you, Chris. How's this year's rookie class come across in camp?
There's been some, some players that jump out at you. Leonard Williams, he looks good. He doesn't, I get a lot of people asking me how Leonard looks, and they want to ask how he looked in comparison to Sheldon Richardson in his rookie year. And I'm just like, that's so not a fair comparison to make. You can't do that. And even though Leonard Williams went higher than Sheldon, and he was thought to be the best player in this draft by many, and Sheldon wasn't looked at that way going into his draft year, but he's just so fast. And Leonard Williams isn't that quick and that fast, and that's what made Sheldon jump out so much. But Devin Smith has looked good until he had the broken ribs injury. The best of the bunch, though, has been the third-round pick, Lorenzo Malden, the outside linebacker. Whenever they go to these one-on-one offensive line and defensive line linebacker blocking drills, it doesn't matter what offensive lineman is put in front of him. He is just beasting them, and he is spinning around them. He's just plowing through them. He has been great, and he is working his way up the depth chart. He's doing a lot of dropping in coverage. He's very quick off the edge. He's got a great burst, great first step. He has definitely been really good and really strong. The other rookie who's looked good at times, and he's creeping his way up the depth chart, is the offensive lineman guard Jarvis Harrison from Texas A&M. And those same drills, I saw the one play, Sheldon was going at him, and he just locked Sheldon up, and you could see Sheldon was a little visibly frustrated. He got Leonard Williams real good once. He's been impressive. So I wouldn't expect him to really start right away at the guard, but if Cologne, Winters is really struggling there, I could see at some point in the season maybe them trying to give him a shot. And he's been impressive. He's a big boy. He moves pretty well. He's got some good base and the kind of anchor in there and hold his ground. So it's an interesting class. And once Devin Smith gets back, it'll definitely help round that class out a little bit better.
Awesome. Sounds good then going forward. Last question then for you, Chris. As we head in towards the last few games of the preseason, who's an under-the-radar player for fans to keep an eye on?
Let's see here. I was going to go with the Chris Owusu thing because he was the standout of camp up until his concussion injury. And, concussions are a tricky thing to deal with, but he had some head issues in college, and that's part of why he wasn't more highly thought of there. So you really don't know what to make of that. Is it going to be a huge problem, or is it just going to be a minor concussion and he'll move on? On the other side of the ball, you got Marcus Williams has really, again, with those corners that they have, they're set. So a lot of these other guys, the Marcus Williams, the Dexter McDougals, they're kind of looked at as afterthoughts. But with the liability that Crow could possibly be and the potential for more injuries just for whatever reason, that depth is going to be important. And Marcus Williams has, he came on really well last year when that secondary was in complete shambles. Idzik scooped him up from Houston, and all of a sudden Rex is plugging him in, and he was the only competent corner they had for a while. So if he can build on that and his training camp performance, that'll be good. And then Lorenzo Malden, again, the way that he comes off the edge and with the way that this defense is built, the way that the line is built, how they're going to occupy all the blockers, the things that Lorenzo Malden can do, he could definitely be really disruptive for the Jets and really cause problems for opposing offenses.
Oh, it's fantastic, Chris. Definitely. I've written them names down. I'll be keeping an eye on them as we go forward. Again, if you want some more Jets insight, follow Chris on Twitter at @CNimbley. And also make sure you head over to jetsinsider.com. Chris, once again, thanks very much for coming on Zone Coverage Football Show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on anytime.
And there we have it. That rounds off our training camp insight on the Jets, Redskins and Patriots for this week. Just going to run through the 3 games that were played last night before we shut this down. Gone for an hour and a half this week, so fantastic. Hopefully we can get some more training camp insight for you next week. But going to those games then, we had the Texans and the 49ers last night. We do have a quarterback battle indeed, not such a one-sided one, a genuine battle as Brian Hoyer and Ryan Mallett both looked pretty solid last night. Hoyer was 2 of 4 for 67 yards, Mallett 10 of 11 for 90 yards. Colin Kaepernick, on the other hand, completed just 1 of his 3 attempted passes for 14 yards. But the star of the show was former Aussie rugby player. Jared Hayne, he had 5 carries, 63 yards, couple of punts returns to 24 yards, and a kickoff return for 33 yards. So impressive debut there, considering he's never played in the NFL before. Texans running back situation, Alfred Blue got the start there, 9 carries, 59 yards. The Vikings and the Bucs squared off also. The Vikings come out on top in this one, 26-16. Jameis Winston, very, very excitable in this game on his debut. Played pretty much all the first half. In fact, he did play the entire first half. He was 9 of 19 at 130 yards and a pick. He was off target on several of his attempted passes. Teddy Bridgewater, the gloved wonder, was 7 of 8 for 86 yards. No Adrian Peterson either last night. He always sits out preseason. Eric Kendricks was a standout. Doug Martin wasn't all that good. He's been given the starting job going into the season. He had 5 carries, 19 yards. And Jarius Wright, Vikings receiver, he had 2 receptions for 50 yards. Your last and final game was the Chiefs and Cardinals. Chiefs won this one 34-19, a triumphant, as in a perfect return for Carson Palmer. He was 4 of 4 for 77 yards on the opening touchdown drive. The Honey Badger also looks to be back to his best. He had an interception as well. Also fantastic to see Eric Berry back on the field after beating Hodgkin's lymphoma early in the year. Chiefs backup Chase Daniels, he was probably the standout of the old night, in fairness. He was 13 of 16, 145 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and there was a couple of firsts last night. Sarah Thomas was the first female referee to play an NFL game, and Jen Walter was also on the sideline. So a couple of fantastic moments there. That is pretty much it, folks. Another busy show. The Fantasy League, if you want in, let me in. Hard Knocks, if you've not watched Hard Knocks, it's aired in the States on a Tuesday. You can get it on Game Pass come Thursday, Friday. Failing that, it is on Sky Sports 1 tonight around about 11:30. I've seen it. It's fantastic. Highly recommended. Fan versus fan feature, if you want to be in on that, hit me up as well. We are heading very quickly towards the season. We will return next Sunday 3:30 to 5 p.m. A huge thank you to everyone that partook in the chat room again today. It's been great fun talking to you guys, and thanks again for spreading the word. It's always an absolute pleasure my end. I will be back next Sunday as mentioned, 3:30 to 5, and today's show was brought to you by DynastySportsEmpire.com, your number one resource for Dynasty sports needs, whether it's MMA, MLB, hockey, NFL. Dynasty Sports Empire has you covered, so head on over to DynastySportsEmpire.com. That is it, folks. I'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. Hustle hit and never quit.